Okay, guys, it's been 3 years. Can we finally talk about this again? Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back today to talk a little Song of Ice and Fire, or more particularly House of the Dragon on HBO coming out here in a couple of months. Now, this is something I want to talk about because, well, look, first off, I want to say that this video is not me telling you why you need to watch House of the Dragon on HBO. If they have kind of taken away your trust, you don't trust them anymore, I completely understand that. I'm not here to try to do that. What I want to kind of talk about is why everyone, one, why they assume the show is just going to be bad, and two, why I think it won't, why I think it'll actually be pretty good. So we're going to kind of talk about that and why. Now, first, I have been well on the record on this channel saying I did not think that we needed this. I said, there are all these great fantasy series behind me here. HBO, you've got the money. Why don't you try one of these other ones? Let this IP rest for a little bit. Well, I guess they thought 3 years was enough time, and brand recognition. I understand why they want to do it, and maybe they want to kind of get that bad taste out of everyone's mouth. Who knows? We shall see. But now that it's closer, I am feeling a little more optimistic about it, and I want to kind of talk about why. So I'm going to begin, guys, with 8 reasons why I think House of Dragon will actually be quite good. Now, first up, I gotta say, new showrunners. Now, don't worry. This isn't just going to be me dunking on Dan and Dave, because, guys, there are plenty of YouTube channels out there who do nothing but relentlessly clown those two guys who don't really need your help to do that. I am not going to do that. What I want to do is kind of talk about these new showrunners. I think, for lack of a better phrase, some new blood on this series is going to be great for everyone. But leading the way are Ryan Condal and Miguel Sapochnik. I hope I'm saying that right. But these two guys, obviously, I think that they have the credentials. You got Kondo, who worked on the show Colony on USA, which is quite an underrated show, is a very big fan of the books, a personal friend of George R. R. Martin's. In fact, he actually pitched doing a Dunk and Egg series before they assigned him Fire and Blood. So obviously, he is all about this universe. So I think that's a really good place to start. And of course, you've got Miguel, who actually worked on some of the most popular Game of Thrones episodes ever. I think he did Harrenhal. I know he did Battle of the Bastards. He did Winds of Winter. He did some of the biggest episodes ever on the show. So it's good to have a vet who was there when the show was at its peak, as well as some new blood, I think, that can kind of breathe some new life. Then, of course, you've got the man himself, George R. R. Martin, is going to be working on this. Save all your jokes for why aren't you writing Winds of Winter till the end of the video, please. But yes, he will be helping to write on some of this. As far as how much he is involved, not really sure. I stopped going to Not a Blog a long time ago because all it did was make me flip tables every time I went there when he said, yeah, still working on Winds of Winter. Next question. So I'm as guilty of that as anybody. So I don't know exactly how much involvement he does have in this. I figured it'd be like on Game of Thrones, where he writes an occasional episode or something like that. But I'm sure he is consulting quite a bit for this. He has kind of said that, he feels like it is very faithfully following his show to a point, which we will get into in a little bit. That brings us to the next point, guys, which is source material. Now, if you read this when it came out, or whenever, it doesn't matter when you read it, this was something when it came out, I read it like immediately, and I was just absolutely just enthralled by this. And you do get the Targaryen family history in this, starting all the way back at Aegon the Conqueror. Now, I think that's where the show should have started, but it doesn't matter. The fact that they have all this history to pull from, as well as Fire and Blood, a book I think this kind of flew under the radar because I did it myself, guys. I was so jaded while reading this. I was like, it's not Winds of Winter, and I was just pissed about that. But in hindsight, I can look back and say, it was pretty good, though. In fact, I'm going to be doing a reread of this on the channel in July to lead up to the show, because I'd like everything to be fresh, because I'm not going to lie, guys, a lot of those Targaryen names, they sound a lot alike, so I need to get a little refresher on that thing. But, of course, this source of material, when the show was at its zenith, I think that's because, guys, the source material was at the best part of the source material. I think Storm of Swords is one of the greatest fantasy books ever written, and that's when the show was really at its peak, and when they ran past that stuff, well, that's kind of where we ran into. But with this, guys, I do think they should have started with Aegon the Conqueror, but Dance of Dragons is an incredibly awesome time period to kind of go into. And who says that they can't go to that stuff, doing flashbacks and things like that? Or if this is a big hit for them. Who knows? They might ever branch out and just keep going backwards and just do stuff all over the place. Who knows? I know they do want to make a big universe out of this, not just, Game of Thrones and then now House of Dragon. They do want to expand this even more, but they have the source material for this, and that's what I think is going to make this rather good. The Targaryen family history, guys, it's as complex as anything you've ever read out there. Take like the Harkonnen family and like times a million, and that's kind of what you kind of get here. Next up, I gotta say, learning from their mistakes. Now look, guys, they're not obtuse. They have ears. They have eyes. They know the reaction to the end of Game of Thrones and how it really kind of just demotivated everybody enough to where they don't even talk about the show anymore. In fact, I think the buzz for this show is not that high, and I think it would have been if Game of Thrones had ended the way that I think everybody wanted it to end. So they're not blind to that. They know that they've got to come out with something special here. They got to come out with something that really slaps. They know that they can't just come out and lay an egg right away. They can't take 3 or 4 weeks to kind of set up everything, because I think that you'll have enough trust that people, or curiosity, I don't know if trust is the word, but curiosity for people to be like, okay, I'll watch the pilot. So they know they've got to hook some people with this pilot. And if they want a shared universe in HBO, this has to get people right away. So people turn around for that pilot, man. It better be a banger is all I'm going to say. So for 3 years now, they've heard these complaints, so they know what not to do. And I think that that's a good thing. You listen to your criticism. I don't think that this isn't Lucasfilm we're talking about here. They never really attack their fans or anything to where they were like, okay, they're just going to keep doubling down. They don't even care. I think that they have ears and they have listened to these things, and they say, hey, we're going to try to do this better. Next up, learning from others' mistakes. I mentioned Lucasfilm there. That's kind of right where I was going for. But there's not an accident, guys, that this is coming out 2 weeks before Rings of Power. This makes me think of like the Monday Night Wars when WWE and WCW, it was WWF at the time, and WCW were like banging heads, and they were like competing for who was going to be like the actual pinnacle of wrestling dominance. I think that's kind of what's kind of going here. If you think that they're not paying attention to their competitors, you're crazy. Because look, Game of Thrones, what do you hear from every other streaming service, cable service, anything when they make a fantasy show? We want the next Game of Thrones, right? So you think they don't know that? They think that they don't know that everyone's just trying to play catch up? And do you think they haven't noticed the negative backlash for Rings of Power? Do you think they haven't seen the tepid reaction, or sometimes another kind of hyper reaction to Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime? I think they want to kind of be known as, the big leagues of fantasy. Hey, there's us and then there's everyone else. We're the real home of fantasy. Everything else is just kind of Walmart fantasy. I think that they really want to do that. So if you don't think that they're watching their competitors, guys, well, maybe you just haven't worked in market research like I do, and you pay attention to this stuff way too much, So they know. They are watching. They're paying attention. What did people not like about Wheel of Time? Because that had every opportunity to be huge, guys, and they really, really dropped the ball. So I think they have watched these things. They've listened to everything that happened with the end of Game of Thrones. They've listened to everything that's happened with this. Even like The Witcher, which was moderately successful. I think of all these series, it's been more success. It's probably been not as successful as Game of Thrones, obviously, but I think it's been the most successful fantasy series since Game of Thrones, but still nowhere even close to the same stratosphere, right? So I think they kind of wanted to say, look, there's us and everyone else. So they've been paying attention to that. They want to be the clear holder of the fantasy throne. Everyone else is just a knockoff. Next up, I gotta say, they got this big budget and they got this production value in place already. They've got sets constructed. They've got all these costumes and stuff that they can reuse. That's great, because you go back now, guys. I was there from the beginning of this, and I remember when I was watching those first few episodes, like everything just feels so small. That was something this was an expensive show to make, and even as expensive as it was, HBO wasn't willing to put that kind of money into it. Now they've got a lot of the stuff they can save money on, and I think they know how big an IP this is. They're not going to be afraid to throw a little bit of money into it. So I don't think it's going to look cheap as those first couple of seasons. I don't think this really started to feel kind of epic in scope until like season 3 of that show. And that's when they realized, hey, we kind of got something here. And that's why they kind of upped the production value. So this, I think, the production value and just the overall aesthetic is going to be big and huge from episode 1. So they got that kind of going for them. Reuse a lot of those sets, like I said, and HBO will be putting the money into the show from the very beginning, because guys, this show's going to have a lot more dragons, which we're going to talk about. Now, usually in this situation, I would say the hardcore fans are going to be there. But I think what makes a show like this go around, guys, and what made Game of Thrones particularly special was that it gathered the casuals. And the thing is casuals are invested in this world, this established world building that they've already begun for this show. So unlike Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon is not going to have to spend, 4 or 5 episodes telling you who all the major players are, showing you where all the major lands are, the conflicts, the kind of the backstory, all that. It can kind of just jump right in because they're going to say, people already know who the Targaryens are. They already know what their plight is. Now they get to kind of see what made them be like Rome of this world, right? They were the very top and they're the very bottom. It kind of see that. So people are going to go into this, they're going to know, they're going to know locations and houses and unions and allies and enemies, and all that stuff's going to be really, really familiar to them. So I think they got that kind of going for them here, but it gives the opportunity, like I said, to show their rise and fall. So people kind of have always been kind of curious about, okay, so how did Viserys and Daenerys find themselves in this situation beginning? We've kind of heard like the hearsay, but we've never seen like the real backstory. So this will kind of give you that if you are looking for it. But I also feel like this is far enough removed from Game of Thrones that they can kind of dodge the, oh yeah, well, the end of Game of Thrones sucked. Look, they're never going to get away from that. It seems, anytime I even I'll talk about the books on the channel and the comments turn into the last season of Game of Thrones. That's just always going to happen. So that's something they're never going to get away from. But that's why I think they've got to come out swinging with this. And I think a good way to do that is this brand familiarity, that they already have this built-in audience now. And while I said that I feel like the established fans would already be there, I don't know. A lot of established fans are so mad still that George is spending time working on things like this instead of finishing the story that they might have just checked out. Look, I admit, like I said, I've been kind of jaded. And it wasn't until the second trailer where I was like, you know what? I kind of need some of that in my life. Because in the end, guys, I want all these fantasy shows to do well. That way we'll get some of my favorite fantasy series back there to get adapted. That's the only way, is if they do well. And I will say, when Game of Thrones first came out, I said, it feels like it's taking fantasy seriously. It's not treating it as super campy. So I still think that's something that a lot of other fantasy shows haven't quite learned how to do, whereas they did. And I think that helps quite a bit. But, guys, people love dragons, and there's going to be a lot more dragons on the show, a lot more. So if you want some stuff like that, I think you're going to be happy. But also on the biggest ones, I think this one is, people don't really put much consideration in this. I do. I talked recently about how much I love to listen to music while I'm reading. The music for Game of Thrones was something that really puts you into that world and that atmosphere. Well, they got the same composer returning. I know I'm going to butcher his name. I think it's Raymond Jawadi. I always say his name wrong, so I apologize for that. But I think having him come back is going to make it feel like the same universe and not feel like something completely new. So I do think that the show needed new life breathed into it, but it needs to feel familiar as well. I think it needs to feel like you look at like the Lord of the Rings trilogy and then you watch The Hobbit and you're like, this doesn't even feel like the same universe. I think they need to make sure that they go that way to where it feels like it's part of the same world. Using a lot of the same sets and things like that, I think will really help. In the end, guys, I think this is the most important one. The story, okay? The thing that gets lost here is that The Dance of Dragons is just a really great storyline. So if you've read World of Ice and Fire, or you've read Fire and Blood, you know that this storyline is particularly great. This really is going to kind of feel like those first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones, and not just saying that because those were the good seasons. What I mean by that is that it's really the war of the succession for the throne. That's really the major focus here. So you're going to get the huge twists. You get the events, I think, that are just as shocking as the Red Wedding. You're going to get politics, your war, your love, your hate, your murder, all that good stuff that makes this the king of all political fantasy. It's all going to be in here. And guys, they've got the source material. That's great. I think the biggest mistake with Dan and Dave is that they thought that show's success was because of them. They didn't realize, no, it's because the story is so strong. That's what's kind of gotten lost in all this, is the show's success was due to the strength of those books. It really was. Because when it was just pretty much a little adaptation with changes here and there, stuff that you had to do for TV or for budget restraints, that's when the show was at its peak. It was when they had that great source material. Now, I'm not saying this source material is on the same level as, the original trilogy of books. No, definitely not, because that's probably one of the best trilogy. If you're counting that as just 3 books, that's one of the best 3 books in any fantasy series ever. But I think this is going to be on par with what they were able to put on television as far as an adaptation goes, because it is just thrilling and exciting stuff. If George says it's staying faithful to the plot, I tend to believe him. And I guess my last point, guys, is why not? Why can't this be great? Now, I know that there's a lot of revisionist history about Game of Thrones now. I remember a week before the final season began to air, there was actual articles and polls and discussions of, is this the greatest TV show of all time? And most people leaned towards yes. Now, after this season was bad and time has went by, people have been, well, actually, it was never good after like season 4. I call a lot of bullshit on that. I said people kind of lived and died with this series, and they were still doing it up until I think about like episode 3 of season 8. It's about when they really finally just turned on it pretty much for good. That was the episode that kind of broke the series, and nothing was ever going to fix it after that. But yeah, I know that people felt betrayed by that, and I get it. I was disappointed too, guys, but what I didn't forget was how great the show was before that. Sure, it had its peaks and its valleys, some stuff that worked, some of the stuff that didn't work, but I always knew when they ran out of source material that the show was going to suffer. It was something that I was always concerned about. However, I think it still stayed mostly good, even after they ran out of some source material, and then it just kind of went off the rails when apparently, believe the rumors that you want to, but, when it kind of just went to the point to where it sounded like George R. R. Martin and Dan and Dave did not get along anymore. That's when I felt like it really fell off a cliff, and that's why I believe they were really using George's notes for most of this stuff. And yeah, they knew how it ended, but they didn't know how to get it there. That's just what I'll say. But that series was amazing for a long, long time, guys. It was such a special part of a lot of your lives out there. So why is it impossible to believe that this could possibly be good? It's still the same author, and you don't have those guys there that you think are going to ruin everything. Even though I think that Dan and Dave are quite good at literal adaptation, but I think their egos just got a little big. But again, I derail here. I just choose to believe in the power of this IP, I guess, and how great the writing actually is. So make all the jokes you want about George. The guy, when he does write, is one of the best to do it. So I think having this story in place is going to help this be quite great. And the story was always the strength of that series, guys. It was not the showrunners. It was not the network. It was the story. And I think having that is going to help them quite a bit, guys. And that's my 8 reasons why I think that this show is actually going to end up being quite good. I might revisit this and laugh at myself. It might happen. But right now, I am leaning towards, cautious optimism. I understand the cautious optimism from everybody, guys. I understand you got hurt, and it's hard to go back, to someone who hurt you. So I get it, but I do hope people will give it a chance, and really, really hope people will give it a chance because, guys, I am planning to do a House of the Dragon after show on the channel. Now, I haven't come up with a name for it yet. We came up with As the Wheel Turns for Wheel of Time, and, hey, that's just super clever, isn't it? I haven't come up with any name for this one yet, but I do have my panel in place. I'm going to have Madison, who also helped me with As the Wheel Turns, and we're bringing on Scott from the Bald Booktuber, who, like me, thinks that this is one of the greatest fantasy worlds ever created. So I thought it'd be nice to have 3 people to kind of bounce ideas off of where we think the show is going. And, of course, 3 people who are well-versed enough in the universe to feel like, yeah, they can talk about it without being like, oh, well, I haven't actually read the books, but, I love the show. That's always a lot of fun. So I decided to do this over doing Rings of Power because I knew that Rings of Power would just be me saying things so bad that I would get demonetized, and that's not fun for anyone at all. So I thought this was the best pick to do another after show. So guys, I think it's going to be good. But if it's not, at least we'll have an outlet to discuss, and you guys can do like you did in Wheel of Time and tell me how stupid I am in the comments. So I am here to provide that therapy. So guys, House of the Dragon, do you plan to watch? No big deal if you don't. These are just why I think it's going to be good. Do you think it's going to be good? If so, why don't you drop down there below and let me know why. If you think it's going to be terrible, well, you're allowed to talk about that as well. So drop in the comments, guys. I will talk to you there.